We are live. Hello, everybody. This is Stephen Williams. I call myself the Good Bishop. I pray that all is well. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our podcast. We made it this week. We made it. They let us through. They let us come on in. You'll see my guest over here tonight. We got so much that we need to talk about tonight. And you see my guest. I have a wonderful guest, but you know how we do this. This is the Behind the Veil podcast. This is me. This is the Good Bishop, Stephen Williams. Y'all know how we do it. Listen, I'm going back old school with the song tonight. This is one of them good ones. This is one of them good old churchy ones that you've been listening to on the radio stations and stuff like that. And I went back and pulled up one of these right here. Check this one out. I know you know this one because out of all of it, this is our word for the week. Hey, God's been good to us. So you might as well think about his goodness, even in all of this pandemic. And we're going to talk about that. But y'all know this is our song for the week. Here we go. Let's do it. God has been good to you. He's made some ways and he's opened up some doors. I need you to clap. We're going to play a little bit of this tonight. Clap them like you love it. Come on, everybody. Put your hands together. Come on. Clap them real good. Here we go. Saying he's been good. Just can't tell it. Everybody say it again. Good God Almighty, I just can't. Well, had a situation y'all happened the other day. Had to call on Jesus Christ as I went down just to pray. Said, can you help me, Lord? Show up, need you now. Before I knew it, God spoke to it. He had worked it out. He's been. Oh, yeah. I just can't tell it all. Anybody know that the Lord's been? God's been good to me. I just can't tell it all. Well, had a pain in my body, y'all. I didn't know what to do. Hurt so bad I called on God to help me to make it through. Remembered in his word, there's healing in his name. I called it out, I had no doubt. He took away my pain. He's been. Oh, just can't tell it. Anybody know? Good God about his being. I just can't tell it all. I got one more verse. Feeling kind of low, cause bills were getting high. They kept right on coming in to the point I said, oh my. Talk to my Father God. He said, I'll work it out. Before I do it, God spoke to it. That's why I'm singing shout. Said the Lord's been good to me. Anybody know that the Lord's been? Just can't help it. Say it again, he's been. That's the good country one right there, Chad.
We hear the non-area every Sunday.
Y'all, that's enough of that one right there. We go. I feel like a good DJ. Just let it fade and I gotta preach on the line. I want him to get too happy and start preaching stuff behind that. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with me again. This is Stephen Williams. They call me the good bishop. This is our Behind the Veil podcast where we explore some other things outside of the Word of God. If you want some good teaching, I'm sure my friend here, he does his thing on Wednesdays and Sundays. I do my thing on Wednesdays and Sundays, but tonight it affords us an opportunity to kind of talk about some issues outside that we can't necessarily pull up from the pulpit. And but we're here. Listen, I have a very special guest tonight. I call him Chad, but his real name is Reverend Charles Henry Armstrong the Third. He is the third. And he is really a native of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He's born and raised in the church. I'm reading all this good stuff at a very young age in ministry. Uh, he got his personal salvation. He was saved at 7. I was eating juices and bonbons. I ain't know nothing about no being saved. I was out playing in the dirt because I'm from Rockingham. My sister, we were playing, making mud pies and riding around. And he's been preaching, man. He started preaching at age 18. That's pretty good there, Chad. It's pretty good. He attended Golden State Baptist College in Santa Clara, California. Who knew? And he was a graduate of the Piedmont International University in Winston-Salem. He currently serves as special assistant to the pastor of Galilee Missionary Baptist Church under the senior leadership of Dr.
Dr. Scovens,
Dr. Scovens, Nathan Scovens. I know I couldn't think how I'm gonna forget that. And as many times I done been over there. And he is the senior pastor of Payne's Chapel Church in Mount Airy, North Carolina. And he serves in the chaplain of the Winston-Salem Fire Department, the youngest ever and the first African-American to serve in that capacity. And he has a passion for the community development and services in the board of directors of the Bethesda Center, as well as the Northwest North Carolina CDC. He is married to the love of his life, Ashley Hardesty, Armstrong. And above all, this is a good dude. He's young and does what he does. He's so vibrant and he busy is all get up. And I am honored that he would have the opportunity to kind of sit down and chat with us for a few minutes. And tonight is going to be a different kind of night because we're going to chop it up. That's all we're going to do tonight. We're just going to chop it up. I wanted to have this conversation. First of all, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here, man.
Thank you, Bishop. First off, before we dive in deep, let me just say thank you for the opportunity to share. Thank you for the privilege with this space. I want to let kind of the people who are watching on my end know that you are a gospel music legend, gospel music icon,
Lord.
pastor as well, family man. And so let me just say this, that thank you for being a person who I can look to for leadership, and thank you for speaking into my life the way you always do. So before I say anything, let me first say thank you for that.
Yes, sir. And look, I don't know about the legend part, but I guess it's legendary when you've been doing it for so long.
I didn't say that, you did, Bishop.
I've been doing it for so long. I guess that's what makes you. I got on I don't know if y'all can see it, Black Lives Matter shirt. You know, I got on my shirt since Chad was coming, and we were going to talk about this whole thing of I'm woke. Now what? And the reason why I chose Chad or wanted him to be a part, because I knew he has a diverse thought process, because not only is he a young man, but he's also in the community as well, and he's also in ministry as well. And so there are a lot of things. And God, but before we can even get to this, and the whole notion is, Chad, you know, we woke, but now what do we do? You know, from your vantage point as a young man. And before we could even get together, we done already had something else that was chaotic with Jacob Blake, you know, in St. Louis. And I'm being told that he was from here.
From Detroit. He's
from Winston and born in this area. I mean, we woke, but now what, man? Like, give me your feelings about this moment today and what has happened Talk to me from your perspective. This whole notion of, we got to do something about these cops. Give me your thoughts, man. How did you feel today when you first heard this, or when this went down?
So I again, first of all, again, Bishop, thank you for the space.
Yeah.
I believe that Black people, I believe that we are not monolithic. So I believe that how I feel, or how you may feel, or how someone else may feel, like we if there are any white brothers and sisters or allies watching this, I think that, like, I have to say at the jump of this, Black people aren't monolithic. So how one Black person feels is not necessarily indicative of the entire race or the totality of culture.
That
So
is
what we
true.
have, what for me, I saw the news yesterday. And so I saw the news yesterday, and I immediately, my first reaction was, again, right now?
Yeah.
Like right now again? And so after the 30, 45 seconds of that, and kind of then we all do the same thing. We click on the link, or we kind of try and figure out more information, and we try and figure out the extenuating or the peripheral circumstances. I'm just exhausted.
Yeah.
Like I should have a better diatribe or speech or monologue about culture and life in America and kind of where we are, but it's just exhausting, because we're saying the same things over and over and over and over and over and over again. And while the names change, the brutality never does.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the name changes, the gender of the individual changes, but the brutality is systemic and consistent.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
the struggle.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. I felt the same way with you. I was like, first of all, when I saw it, I just couldn't believe the dynamics behind it. How, he was walking away. Like, I would have never been walking away, I guess, with somebody with a gun. That was the first thing. Next thing is, I'm like, dude, y'all really just shot this man in the back with children in the car? And I'm woke, but I need to do something else more. I feel like something else got to be done. Even with Winston-Salem, and I mean, we just had the incident with the man, and I'm gonna let you open that up. I mean, we're here to chop it up tonight. I'm woke, but now what do I do with all of this?
So Bishop, I think that one of the first points is, I think we have to define the word woke. I think we have to give some definition, or I think we have to kind of give some contextual boundaries to what woke is. Because if we can say someone is awake or woke, then we could also say the antithetical point, that others are asleep.
Yes.
And so what I think we have to look at is the idea that wokeness in America as a Black person is literally just lived experience.
Yeah.
So no matter whether or not we agree with someone's political beliefs, no matter whether or not we agree with their point of view or their perspective, what we got to look at is the fact that Black people have lived in Black skin. So there is an awareness of what the problems and the, to not use a preacher word, but the vicissitudes or the peripheral things that we deal with in the struggle of that.
Yeah.
But to say that, like, we are to say that there are woke people is to say that there are people that aren't woke. And so I think we have to say, and I think we got to make it very clear, that just because you have a Facebook account doesn't mean you're woke. Just because you have an email address, that doesn't mean you're woke. Just because you read a few books, that doesn't mean you're woke. And so I think the issue is that there are people that are woke, but woke is not an excuse for not doing work.
Gotcha. Yes.
And so when we're kind of looking at the idea of woke, I think we got to really look at the idea of what does it mean to be awakened to where we are in culture, where we are in society, because that's just awareness.
Yeah.
Knowing where we are is awareness. Seeing what's going on, that's awareness. But to use the word woke, and I feel like we've worn that word out.
Certainly.
That word woke is so indicative of so many things, or the possibility of that. So for me, one of the things that I think is huge is that we have to look at the fact that awareness and actual work, or actual pushing the movement forward, are two completely and totally different things.
Right.
And even when we talk about woke, there's a level of wokeness that some people feel like they have that another group of people would immediately say, well, you're not woke. And so this is how I think we can kind of contextualize woke for the conversation. I think we can contextualize woke for the conversation in saying that one is first aware of their surroundings and what's going on. And I think before we can do that, the prerequisite is first being personally aware and having done one's personal work. But then we can say, okay, now that you're woke, what do you do with this? Now that you have this knowledge, what do you do with this? Now that you have this perspective, now that you've read Why We Can't Wait by Dr. King, or now that you've read The Measure of a Man, or now that you've read the autobiography of Malcolm X, or now that you've read some things by Assata Shakur or Angela Davis, or now that you've read a few Fannie Lou Hamer speeches, how then do you synthesize everything that you've experienced and everything that you've learned? And so I think we're dealing in a space now with people where there's a lot of perceived wokeness, but there's a lot of work that we haven't done yet.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think that's great. But I think that this whole notion of being awake or woke, if you will, comes from the notion, and this was simple to me. It's like when I see the rescue squad, or what we used to call down in the country, the ambulance, and the ambulance would go by, we paid no attention to it because it wasn't going to my house, you know? And so these things that we were seeing, these killings, you know, it wasn't, and I don't know about you, knock on wood, Jesus, the angels be around me. I've never like really been harassed like that. You know what I'm saying? I've never been stopped because I'm a Black man, maybe because I just stay in my little circle. But I think the cameras have made us aware that this thing really has been happening a long time. And now, like for instance, here's a question I have for you.
Yes, sir.
Are you at all, as a Black man, concerned when you walk out the door now that you weren't 5 years ago? Are you more concerned now in your travels, or are you, because I am more conscious now of not only what I'm doing, but I'm really conscious now about my surroundings, because I'm saying this could happen to anybody I know. Like, I have a son who might be closer to your age, and I'm like, Lord Jesus, like, I would have never thought that would happen here, me, this, that, never. Now we're seeing it at such a frequency. And I think that's what's happening. But I do agree with you. We've got to get to a point now where we do something, not just the realization of it, but what do we do with this? And I love the protest with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, this Jacob Blake thing. What do we do? What do you think about, even as a young man, in this wokeness, and what can we do, since you're communal, you're more in the community? You know, we'll address this one issue and then we'll go for it.
No, definitely. So, first off, Bishop, I just as a Black man driving, yes, I'm gonna be honest. Like, I'm actually very freaked out by it. I'm a pastor by profession trade, but I also have a therapist, because I think that, like, you can't do what we do for a living, especially at the level that you do it at, without having somebody who you can download with and kind of share with that. And a lot of my conversations with my therapist have recently been around me driving, just because of the fact I'm driving in any different day. I could be driving to Mount Airy. I could be driving to a rural area. I could be driving through some different areas and places and spaces. But to the broader question around what do we do, Bishop, you gave me an incredible lesson several years ago. I don't know if you remember this, but you gave me this lesson about focusing on what you can focus on, and then trusting God to do and facilitate and work where you're not. And so I think one of the biggest things that we have to do as African Americans, as people, is we have to realize that it's not our job to wear the cape. And because it's not our job to wear the cape, it's not your job to fix everything. Right. You're not gonna fix your community by yourself. You're not gonna fix the world by yourself. And so I think it's really on us as African Americans, as Black people. I think it's really huge for us to find the places and spaces where we have influence, to find the places and spaces where racism, oppression, poverty, systematic injustice impacts our life, and then speak to it at the point that it impacts us. Now, I think there are moments where God empowers us to speak to things that affect other people, and there's moments where we just can't stand silent, or we just can't sit back, and we just can't be quiet. But I think a lot of times, oftentimes, we want to be missionaries to the world without first being missionaries to our neighbor. We want to save the world, but we don't want to save our neighborhood.
I love that. That's good stuff.
One of the most frustrating things for me, just to be transparent because of this space, I was having a conversation with a group of people who were bashing Kamala Harris. They're bashing Kamala Harris last week online, right? And this is a mixed group of males. These are Black males and white males, and they're bashing Kamala Harris. And they're bashing Kamala Harris, but they can't tell me who their city council representative is.
Wow.
They can't name their county commissioners. They can't name three, and these are people in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County. They can't name 3 people on the school board, Bishop.
Wow.
And so I think a lot of times we want to be woke nationally. We want to be woke down the street. We want to be woke to the world, but our neighborhoods, our communities, the places where we can really affect work and change and policy and legislation that changes things in our communities, that's not what we're focused in, because I think a lot of times we're trying to prove to people that we're woke instead of really kind of doing work in the places and spaces that really intersect with our lives.
I like this. So here we go. I don't know, your therapist probably says this because somebody told me this is what therapists say. Let's unpack that. You know what I'm saying? So for us who's in our community, let's learn our city councilmen. Let's learn the people who are local. Let's call their names. Let's figure that out.
Can I like throw just a crazy caveat out here about this?
Go for it. This is
last night. Winston-Salem City Council had a meeting where they're talking about $2 million being taken from one agency and then being redistributed. We're talking about $2 million, but nobody in the community. And I think it's very crass to say nobody. So I need to pull that back. And I believe in apologizing when words are used poorly. So I yes, sir.
I'll give you that very few people. How about that?
What I think we got to say and we got to look at is that there's very few people in our community that knew that a meeting happened where we're talking about $2 million. That's like a public meeting, and people can make comments in those public meetings, because the people who are meeting are the people that we pay. Like, our tax dollars fund them. So our employees are talking about our money in our city. And a lot of times we don't even know anything about it.
Yeah, because I didn't know they had no meeting. I need to be on the meeting line. I need a list.
I'm gonna put you on the text. I'm gonna put you in the group text.
Put me in the text so I can tell it. I want to be able to tell it. Because that is important. And because we were talking about police reform, and I was like, I asked some of the city leaders, hey, because I'm not an angry Black man, give me a seat at the table so that I can talk in a more calm manner at that time when we first started having all of these things. But you got to be able to sit at the table where you are. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I, that's a great statement, but I challenge the people who you were talking to. You might not like Kamala. Is that how you say it, Kamala?
Kamala Harris, yes, sir.
I've been saying it 15 different ways.
I think I have too.
Yeah, but the question is, you don't like Kamala, but who you gonna vote for if you don't? But,
at the end of the day, Bishop, I like, and this is why I respect you, because you're so many things, but what I know you are, as am I, is a pragmatist.
yes.
And what we have to do in the business sector, in where you kind of run and do what you do, Bishop, we understand pragmatism. And so I don't think this is an over contextualization of the facts, but this is essentially where we are. We're looking at a point in America where essentially we are no one's happy about Joe Biden running. We're not really happy.
Right.
Kamala Harris has some issues in her prosecution record, but most people are just looking at things that they see on the internet, and most people don't even know how to read a prosecution record. So there's that, but whatever. With that being said, what I think we got to look at, and I never played football because I was way too skinny. I don't lift enough weights for that. But if we're on a football field and we're coaching, or we're on the sidelines, and let's say we have Joe Biden as the quarterback, or let's say we have Kamala Harris as the quarterback, even if we're upset with them and we're in the last seconds or we're in the final minutes of the game, is it advantageous to yell at the quarterback, boo, you suck, you're terrible, I hate you, and we're on the sideline that they're coming back to? Or is it advantageous to allow them to do what they need to do to win the game, so that then once we go to the locker room, once the game is over, we can then say, okay, come here, listen, now this is wrong, this ain't right. But we can't get to that point if we're not pragmatic enough to realize that when we bash the political candidate that is necessary for just change, because it's necessary in America, we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah. You are eloquent. I just say, well, who else you gonna vote for? You want me to run? Because I want y'all to vote for me. Vote for me. If you want me to run, I'll run. They but two people. It's what do you want the people to do? And because. And we're moving right into this, because I want to talk about this whole notion of voting. And I'm going to talk about that again next week, about how we need to do something. We're having another special meeting, another special one next week, because if we don't get out and do what we need to do, then we wasting time. You ain't woke at all if you're not going to do that. I shared with somebody, get you a sandwich and get you a Subway sandwich and get you a drink and just stand in line with your mask on and put your music on and wait your turn. But we have to be agents of change. And coming from, we can't talk about this stuff in the pulpit. We can't tell you who to vote for. We're not supposed to do that, which is why we have Behind the Veil, so we can talk to you openly about this whole notion of not allowing these moments to slip by. If you're going to be woke, now what? This is the opportunity for us to be conscious, pragmatic. My whole notion is, what are the other y'all gonna vote for Kanye West? Is that who you gonna vote for? Come on, y'all. And so here we are. You mad at Kamala? You mad? I don't know what she did. I just know, she was an AG. They said she wasn't good for Black people. If she was an AG, her responsibility was to AG, is to put people in jail. It wasn't to defend them. It was to do something else. And so, again, don't know. But the question is, you're right. If that's the quarterback we've been given, am I going to distract the quarterback that we've been given so that the other team can win? And I don't get it. But we're gonna, where the young people are with this voting thing, man. Like we're woke now, but what's the whole notion? And we're gonna get into it again next week. But talk to me about where you are in this whole thing, and what are you doing with the youth your age, trying to rally them, because we up under this notion that people don't think their vote counts.
Well, Bishop, I'm always down for a shameless plug, so I'm glad you asked. So
Let's
I
do it.
think voting now is more so important than ever before. I think we saw President Obama years ago. Gosh, we miss that guy, don't we? Don't we all miss that guy? Like, man, I miss that guy. Like, I remember this moment where people were booing, and there was literally, I mean, there was a crowd booing, and I mean, it was like very visceral. I mean, it was visceral booing. I mean, people were angry, and like he let it go on. I think, and to me, that's the genius of his presidency, was that like he allowed it to go on for a moment, then he pauses and he says, "Don't boo, vote." So what I think is huge is that protesting. And I don't think we will ever see a summer the way we saw this summer really transpire.
Right.
We got to look at the fact that George Floyd passes away in May. We see Ahmaud Arbery pass away in May. And so we hear
Brianna was in what, March?
March. We hear the story of Brianna only after we've seen really the video of Ahmaud and then George.
That's right.
And essentially, these moments are, for my generation, what I would say was Rodney King for another generation.
That was for my generation. Yeah.
So
you really are nice. You're just trying to say for the old people, we had Rodney King.
I didn't say.
But Chad, but see, and that's what I'm talking about. See, that perfect segue. The Rodney King incident happened in LA. That didn't happen in North Carolina. So we were like, that would never. And that's a big city. You know, that ain't going, I guess it was California, LA, but it was. Ain't going to come over us. You know, that's going to happen in Detroit. That's going to happen in New York. Now we are seeing it where it's happening to everyday, regular, ordinary people who's not doing anything. But you know, I say that's why this thing has me awakened, you know, that I can't just live in the confinements of those four walls and give people great revelation and let us hear the dynamics of God and feel his presence without being concerned about my son, without being concerned about myself or my daughter, you know, if you're going to have children, your future children. I mean, man, if we don't do something now, this stuff they just shooting black people like it's a turkey shoot. But go ahead. You were talking about something else, but I wanted to give you the preference behind the woke thing. Go ahead.
No, I think that's huge. And a mentor of mine, Dr. Eric Mason, Bishop, I'm gonna send you this book because this book is phenomenal.
I'm ready.
Dr. Mason wrote this book called Woke Church.
I love it.
He pastors the Epiphany Fellowship in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He's a phenomenal writer. PhD he's a Dallas Theological Seminary grad, but he's not a typical Dallas Theological Seminary grad. One of the things that's huge about Dr. Mason,
go ahead,
Dr. Eric Mason, Woke Church. I think one of the things that's kind of so huge about this is that he talks about like the window of time and how different time periods were very key in us seeing different levels of change. Bishop, to go back to the point of Rodney King to now, I think what you're saying is that we're in a window of time now that we can't miss. Everybody feels like we are in a window where we can really push for a different type of change. I mean, there's marches that have kind of continued on since May and a lot of other work. We've seen a lot of Confederate statues come down. We've seen a lot of cities let Black people paint Black Lives Matter on streets. We've seen a lot of people change marketing campaigns. The NBA let people put words on the back of their jerseys, but not a lot of like cities or counties or states have changed the racist legislations that they have.
Right.
So we're dealing with this idea of we're trying to push for change in a window where people are saying they're giving us change, but the change that they're giving us is this huge word that I think Black people have to know when we have to call this out when we see it. we have been given performative justice all summer.
I love it, man.
We haven't been given real justice. We've been given performative justice. We've been given overt actions. We've been given overt different things to kind of have people share. But what we have not received in open honesty is like real justice. And so what you're saying to me and what I hear in your voice as a bishop of the Lord's church, but as a father in ministry, I hear you saying, son, don't miss this window.
Yeah.
Because once this window closes, we don't know when this window opens back up again.
That is true. That is true. And we have to do something completely different now than we have ever done before. Thus, this platform, you just can't talk about it. And I get it. Jesus is going to help us, but Jesus also has to help me vote. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I got to go vote to do my part. There's something I must do. And
Jesus ain't gonna call your Uber to get to the polls.
Yeah. I mean,
you have to drive there yourself, or you got to
drive there yourself. He ain't coming on a Honda. You're gonna have to drive your Honda. Amen. You're gonna drive your Honda to the polls. And so there's this whole notion that we have to do our part. I love how you're talking. Now tonight, y'all, we have a hodgepodge because I got somebody, and I just want to talk about it just very briefly. I'm concerned, and I don't even know how you're going to do this because you interact with this, you intermingle with that, but I'm concerned with the evangelical church.
Talk about it.
And I'm like, wait 1 minute. We have read their books. We have gone to their conferences. We got their information.
We sung their songs in our churches.
We switched our way of worship because we wanted to be, now all of a sudden, and I'm going to do a segment on this because I ain't quite figured out, just because it's slow and it's CCM, does that make it worship? Have we lost the Black experience to say that that's no longer worship? And we've done that, church. We've done it. We've made the songs. We put it into our repertoire. We've done all of that. But when this Black Lives Matter thing happened, the white church was very, very silent. And it has caused me to look at this a little differently. It has caused me to challenge this whole notion. Are you for the whole, or are you, and again, we can't say everybody, but are you really for it? What is this gospel for everybody, or is this gospel just for people who look like you? Because if it's for everybody, then there should have been something coming from you that says, I thought we were all brothers and sisters. Y'all been preaching that to me. We brothers and sisters in Christ. Yet when the atrocities are happening to us, you get silent. You interact. Talk to me, because I'm a little woke, but I'm a little wounded. I'm a little wounded now. I'm a little wounded.
That's good. That's a sermon.
I'm woke, but I'm a little wounded because I trusted that you were giving me the word and that you were exercising the word, and that you presented that to me. You presented that this is a way of worship. You presented that this is a better way to be in touch with God. And now that the people who don't look like you are having a little challenge, we would defend you, but you haven't said anything to us. Chad, I'm woke and I got issues. I got a problem. Talk the bishop down off this ledge, because I know you interact. You are definitely an interactor. So
I'm angrier than you, though. This is why.
Okay.
One, I'm not as mature.
Somebody would argue that I'm not even. I know some people online right now who's saying, "No, Chad, you got the bishop. He just
No,
got the
no,
title."
like Bishop, so I want to go back to 2 points. Today's a special day for me, so I want to tell a story and then go back. So
Okay.
13 years ago today, I get on a plane with my father, who went home to be with the Lord earlier this year, and my mother. And I moved from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Josh White's watching this right now. Josh White is a dear friend of mine who is pastoring at Canvas Church, also getting ready to do some phenomenal work in Portland. Josh, I love you dearly, brother. Josh White and I meet 13 years ago last week. This week, rather. We meet this week ago, 13 years. We meet this week, 13 years ago. I moved to Santa Clara, California. I'm going to college and serving in kind of some ministry capacities, and in a church that I care to not mention the name, because I never want to bash any kind of community of faith, if that is what they choose to be called. But what I do have to look at is I have to look at the idea that for 2 years of my life, I was in a very conservative theological space. And when I say conservative space, so much and so to the point that this church is still having church right now in California, in person, live, inviting people, and received a cease and desist from the governor of California about even worshiping. So this is the type of environment this is.
Certainly.
So they have what's called bus ministry, where they take, in a very affluent area where their church is located, they take buses and then go to the hood,
Certainly.
or lower income areas or lower equity line areas. And then they bus the kids from their homes and neighborhoods to this church in this affluent area. But they don't allow the children to go to the actual church that they attend. They allow them to go to what's called a bus church, because the affluent congregation does not want to be distracted by the missionary work that they're supposedly doing. And so they want to do the work, but they don't want to worship with the people. And so, we know several churches in our area that kind of operate on a similar model. And so for me, it comes to a head where I had a relationship with one of these students who was being bused back and forth, and his older cousin gets shot. I'll never forget it as long as I live. They're Samoan Crips. And if you're in Northern California, you know you don't play with Samoan Crips. You don't play with Crips and Bloods anywhere in California. But in Northern California, you do not play with Samoan Crips, because they're huge. I mean, they're Samoan, like they're Samoans. And then like they're really about a gang culture lifestyle. So I was doing some ministry working with them kind of outside of it, and informed the church that this young man was going through this incident where his older cousin had been shot and killed. And the response of the church was, well, what was he doing wrong? And so before we even began to look at what was going on with the family, how are they dealing with this? How can we spiritually support them? How can we be what they need? We had to look at the idea that we're looking at and we're judging right and wrong, and we're being judge, jury, and executioner before we look at this situation. So there's that situation. And so I think what I have to look at and synthesize is for me, in my experience, I was just repeatedly disappointed by what I think everybody already knew about the evangelical church. And so I think we have to look at the fact that you and I both know, as products of the Black church, the Black church and the evangelical church are completely and totally different.
Right.
But before we even talk about the evangelical church, we have to talk about why we even need the Black church. So let me go back historically to say something that is going to be very problematic. I apologize. These words are not Bishop's, they're my own. White people have been trying to tell Black people how to do church since the beginning of time.
That's right.
White people, like 1619, if we're saying that is the first point in time where we can say African slaves are on the continent of America, they have been telling us how to do church and what they think works better for us for centuries. So I think a lot of our acquiescing is one cultural, and because we felt like we had to play catch up. But when we look at the name of a man like Crispus Attucks, or when we look at the name of a man like Absalom Jones, the founder of the AME Church, or when we look at a man like the name of Nat Turner, we see that God has always empowered us as African Americans to decipher God for ourselves,
Right.
and then serve in a relationship with him. And so I think when we saw a lot of churches bring Black people to sit on couches and have conversations, when we saw a lot of people who posted pictures of their mother on Mother's Day, but then 2 weeks later said nothing about George Floyd, when we saw people who struggled to say the words Black Lives Matter for so many other reasons, I think we were alerted to what we already knew. And it's the fact that we're good enough to sit in church, we're good enough to sing on stage, we're good enough to pay conference registration, we're good enough to be people's Black friends, but we're not good enough for people to inconvenience themselves when our lives are on the line.
That's true. But it comes from, and you say that to, I mean, and you say, they are what we already thought that they were. And I guess for some of us, because we preach hope, there is this message of hope. I'm thinking that the text, as it has worked for me, is definitely working for them, because they have a head start on the knowledge. They have a head start on the theology. The commentaries come from them. You can see the text. You can see that, and typically I don't usually take this podcast this way, but you can see where Jesus is dealing with the Samaritan woman. You can see that he is bridging the gaps. You're looking at it. You know that this is no longer about the Jews. You know that this now Paul is given to the Gentiles, and Paul and Peter has this dialogue, this confrontation, if you will. Stop fronting when you get around the Gentiles, and stop, we see that. You've read that. And my hope was, here is a moment for us to make a real difference as a people, not racially, as a people. And yet here I am, I'm looking at it, and I had this hope. And boy, there is nothing like having expectation. You don't get disappointment until you have expectation out of somebody. And what it has done is, it has made me treat them like I treat some people. I do not have expectation out of you. I expect you to be just like you are, because every time you act like you do, you give me what you give me. I do not expect anything different, because you got to want change in order to be changed. But when it happened, Doc, I became so woke, and it made me nervous. My perception of how I view what has been fed to us, because now we do a type of worship, because it seems to me that we have said, oh, they're closer to God with the way that they do it, and we are farther away from God because of the way we do it. We're more, I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna let you talk. This is what they tell me.
Say it, Bishop.
I had somebody tell me this, and I've been wanting to say this forever. I had somebody tell me this. They said, you still preaching those people, getting them emotional, got them running around and jumping, and they said, you're going to do more teaching, and so they can worship. And I looked at them. I said, praising God and running around is an emotion. So is lifting up your hand. That's the same emotion. It's emotions that you do. You are only going to be changed at the core of your heart. It is not a, oh, you do this, da, da, da. That's worship. Now, all of a sudden, nothing that the Black church has done is worship. Nothing that you do culturally. A hymn is no longer worship. Are you kidding me? Worship comes from what's happening on the inside of you. It is not. We know some hellish people who sit up and fa la 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 la. We got hellish people doing on both sides. It's a matter of the heart, and the black church needs to get woke. Y'all need to get woke like I's woke. Get woke, chillin', and get relationship that's not, because I'm telling you, it has made me aware that this thing really is personal. My relationship with God is personal. And so, I mean, go ahead. But that's horrible that they wouldn't let them even worship in the same building.
Well, and I think that's huge. Like, even when we go back to the AME, so like when we go back to the AME church, like Absalom Jones is literally like trying to take communion. And like we're talking about the Lord's Supper. And when we go back and we look at scripture, I think we see that the Middle East is a lot more demonstrative and a lot more emotional and emotive than we really realize. So for me, Bishop, it was a synthesization of understanding that our lives are an act of worship. Yes. The Bible is clear, whether you eat, whether you drink, whatsoever you do it unto the glory of God. Yes. So me eating a cheeseburger with bacon, mustard, pickles, and ketchup, lettuce, and onions, because that's how I like it, is just as much as an act of worship as something else in my life, because everything that I am is glorifying God. And so I definitely synthesize with that. I think one of the things that we struggled with as African Americans is hope deferred makes the heart sick.
That's what the book said.
And I think we're dealing with the fact that hope has just been so deferred, especially by the evangelical church. So I was talking with a group of leaders and a group of pastors, and one of the things that I stated to them was, I think that when we look at the Bible now, more so in culture, when we read the story, we see the cultural disparities in the story, I think now more so than ever before. Certainly. But one of there's I think 3 gospels that America has been very guilty of preaching. Okay. And so I don't think that we have preached the true gospel. And I think that we have to look at the fact that we've preached, and I want to kind of talk about them, but I think we preached the prosperity gospel. Yep. While we got the prosperity gospel, I would suggest that our counterparts lived off the patriotic gospel. Yes. And I think there's also another gospel that people can't let go that is the biggest struggle for people. And I don't think it's prosperity, nor do I think it's patriotism. I think it's the gospel of privilege.
Chad, you dropping knowledge, sir. Talk to us.
I think we got the prosperity gospel, which, like, I am a product of the prosperity gospel. Me too. We are just kind of, and I don't mean from any faith community. I mean just my age. I grew up with like seeing the pastor in like the tailored suit, and I'm like, y'all was fly. You know what I'm saying? I wanted a pair of Gators.
I didn't get the tailored suit thing. I did get some good shoes though. I got a couple.
Got some good shoes, Bishop. I've seen some.
I had some good shoes, but I didn't get that tailored suit. I didn't get that. I didn't get.
You have some good shoes, Bishop. You had them. You had.
And I didn't get all that. I missed that journey. But I thought it was good.
No, so I think the prosperity gospel, it made us really look at capitalism, and it made us look at getting. And so we had preachers who were looking at rappers and NBA players and CEOs quiet as it's kept. And they were taking the majority of their plays from people who were in market America and not necessarily faith leaders.
I agree with that 100%.
So that's the Black church. Then I think we look at the Caucasian church, the evangelical church, and as a Black man, whenever somebody gets overly patriotic, I get a little nervous.
Very.
Like there's this I think as a Black man, there's and I don't know what the number is, but there's like a threshold of like, if I see too many American flags, like I begin to kind of do this and I do this, and like, y'all have fireworks today? Like, is there a civil war? Like is there a reenact? Like what, so I think the patriotic gospel, and I think in the South, we definitely see it more, that there is a huge tying of people's patriotism to their religion or to their faith system or their belief system. And so we tie the belief system of a first century rabbi from Palestine who was a low-level anarchist at best. We tie that to this cultural revolution that happens in the 1700s in colonial America, and we now have people who are like, "This is my country." Not this is our country. This is my country.
My country.
And so I think patriotism places a high value on self instead of the actual gospel. So I think we're dealing with one, the gospel of prosperity. Two, we're dealing with the gospel of patriotism. And I think we can call those out very quickly.
Right.
What we can't call out is the gospel of privilege. Yeah. And that's where I think we see the evangelical church sitting. We don't see them sitting in patriotism because Donald Trump has made it very difficult for them to do that. That is true. So for the churches that we see championing Donald Trump at this point, I think we just write them off. But there are churches that are holding on to privilege. Dr. Scovin said this to me one day in a very brilliant way. He said, boy, because Doc called me boy sometimes when he got to fuss me out. He said, boy, what you got to realize is that you do not have the luxury or the privilege of being quiet about certain things. Right. And I think what we see, and we can extrapolate from what he told me to that, last thing I'll say is that we're dealing with, and I think we look at a lot of CCM artists. I think we look at a lot of writers. I think we look at a lot of publishing companies. I think we got to look at a lot of universities, Liberty University. I think we got to look at a lot of different people, places, and spaces and say, you are operating in the gospel of privilege that works for you and not the gospel that Jesus intended for us to share, because the gospel that Jesus intended for us to share would mean that if we were sharing it, we'd have a lot less poor, a lot less hungry, a lot less orphans, a lot less economic, racial, and systematic disparities. And so what we are doing is we are living in privilege, prosperity, and patriotism instead of what God has really called us to. I know that was a lot, but I'm sorry for.
No. I'm glad. I looked down at my Facebook, and there's a guy named Bruce Standback, and I've got to get Bruce on. Bruce was very instrumental when I was a little kid, teaching me. He was the dude that taught me how to eat chicken at a banquet. He was the guy that taught me how to eat chicken at a banquet. And he was the guy, and I'm going to give him his props now. Y'all don't know him, but I'm going to bring him on one day. And Bruce was very instrumental in giving back and helping and in the community and doing community work. And I think for what we did was, where I was, we were so focused in on dancing and shouting and all that good stuff, we missed this whole thing that there was a gospel of patriotism, that there was a gospel of privilege that was happening around us. We couldn't see it, I guess, because we didn't want to see it, on one hand. On the other hand, God, here I am 20, 30 years later, and I'm like, wow, this is what that dude was trying to show us back then. It didn't have this kind of name attached to it, but they were trying to present this to us, and we missed the boat. We got caught up. But I want to let the people to know I's woke now, and so we've got to be able to look at this like it really is. And those are three excellent points that you've placed, because Kenneth Copeland probably started the gospel of prosperity. That was that whole notion, 70s and 80s. And patriotism has always been prevalent, and they associate that, the gospel, with patriotism. My notion is people get stuck on pro-choice and gay and lesbian rights and all that good stuff, but you don't even care about regular people. I want people to understand. I know what the text says. I read it just like you read it. I don't have no. I'm gonna go get me a PhD behind my name, so these people will start taking me serious, like I ain't read something. I read it, and and I'm looking at it, And I'm saying, but what about humanity? What about this whole notion that this gospel is for everyone? It is not contingent for the one who is just going to be right in every area. It is to be presented to everyone. And for you to make it just about the privilege, you know what I'm saying? And Scovens is right. We can't be silent because we don't have that for all that. I'm back and forth. I told y'all tonight this was going to be a hodgepodge of me and Chad just kind of chopping it up about being awake, and we've got to be awakened. I'm getting ready to throw you a curveball. This ain't got nothing to do with nothing.
Can I say something on what you just said, Bishop? I think we have a lot of I think that in the Black church especially, there's been for years and for a long time we didn't talk about a lot of things, and there's been a lot of different things. I always synthesize my conversation with people whenever we're talking about LGBTQI rights, or we're talking about pro-choice or pro-life. Whenever we're talking about this is kind of how I synthesize the conversation. Everybody wants Jesus and wants the gospel for what they need it for,
right?
But they don't want to necessarily believe that it could also be what for someone else needs it for.
Right. That's true.
So we only want the gospel to work for us. Right. We only want the good news to work for us within our boundaries. But then the struggle of it for me also is that a lot of times the greatest fighters are also the most like the greatest fighters and the greatest people who want to die on certain hills are oftentimes just like the most uneducated in the original textual language, in like the languages that Jesus was speaking, and they can't even tell you the scripture reference for what they're talking about in the Bible. They just always heard it was wrong, so they just want to die on that hill, which is to the point that we want Jesus where we want Jesus, but we don't want to extend Jesus to where other people may need Jesus.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree with you. That's a whole conversation.
Whole nother
conversation. All right. So I'm going to throw it out because can you believe we almost out of time? I'm going to throw this out for you because I'm woke to this. I'm woke to, there are two things that's bothering me. All right. And I'm having this conversation tonight. If you want to chime in, send us some questions or something, or just shoot me on Facebook if you want to come on the show. We'll talk about you being a guest so we can have this, so we can chop it up. And I don't have to be right about everything. I'm just saying that on the jump. But there are two things that is bothering me, that I'm awakened by, that I'm really disturbed by in our community. I'm disturbed by how we musically, and I don't listen to a lot of rap and all that good stuff, but musically, how we dog the woman out. And then we can disrespect her. And then on another hand, she's our queen. Now, and y'all church people, y'all know all the lyrics to this negativism of how people treat women and they do what they do. And then you come back and you say, oh, but treat them like a queen. And I'm like, is anybody awakened?
Right. Like
this is hypocrisy.
Right.
Like you get to call them whatever you want to call them. You get to treat them like you ever want to treat them. And this ain't got nothing to do with the text. This ain't.
Nah, it's real. Like,
this is just an awakening that is getting on my last nerve. Like we act like we have to support somebody who dogs out the woman. That's our artist. That's my jam. They saying crazy stuff. And then you want to come back and say, oh, but treat her like a queen. Now, which one is it, children? I mean, what are we going to do? Are y'all awake to the point where you're going to call people out on this and stop giving them your support and stop giving them your, you know all the lyrics. You don't know the 12 disciples, but you know all the lyrics to whatever Lil Wayne wrote or whoever is out right now. And they can be horrible as it pertains to the Black queen. And yet you want to get in my face and say, oh, let's treat them like a queen. Y'all ain't awake, and y'all, it's sounding confusing to me, and it's sounding confusing. And the other thing is, I'm gonna let you chat it up. The other thing is, and again, this is my hodgepodge, so y'all just blame, y'all just work with me. I don't know how you know more lyrics for R&B music than you know about the gospel lyrics. I'm confused. Which side are we really gonna be on? I just don't. I'm old. I'm the old man sitting on the porch. I don't understand it. But I'm awake to the point where I'm like, no wonder there is this infusion, Chad, where there is a lack of what I call power and the release of power, because you can't really do power on both sides, to me. But let's talk about the women. Let's deal with this whole cultural thing, because it's an African American cultural thing, right?
Yes, sir. So I am married to a Black woman. I came from a Black woman. My sisters are Black women. I love Black women. So let me start there. Also, I can't speak for Black women, and I don't think as a pastor it's like I don't think it's my job to speak for Black women, because I know a lot of female Black pastors who are phenomenal at speaking for themselves.
Right.
And so I think there's a several kind of caveats, I guess, from my perspective. I see in Scripture, the Bible's very clear that the Lord says that where there is unity, that's where I command the blessing.
Right.
And so I think that because we are not as united as we could be as a people, I think because brothers have not taken as good of care of their sisters, of our mothers, of our wives, as we should have, I think we see that we don't have the unity that we could and we should have. And that blessing is the missing link.
Ooh, let's unpack.
To like take it down, to like throw everything out. Let's just contextualize the situation by news. Bishop, I'm gonna say names. Have you ever heard the name Tory Lanez? Just act like you have.
Yeah.
You heard Megan Thee Stallion. So
he just the one who just shot the girl.
Bingo. So let's talk about it. I think we got to look at the fact that that is indicative of a broader cultural thing that we see happening. Let me first say, Bishop, I believe that while you consider yourself to be the old man on the porch, I would say that you are everything but that, because one, your knowledge, your awareness, and then two, your contextual engagement with it, I think, is huge.
Yeah.
So I think when we look at the situation is what it is. What we do know is we know that Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion are in a car. Tory's from Canada, Megan's from Houston, Texas. We see that they're riding in a car. There's some level of relationship, and he shoots her. Right. She tells the police that he didn't shoot her, and she doesn't even publicly say that to try and save his character.
Right.
We then see that she then has to come out to save herself to tell the truth. Right. And so we see that there is this duplicity in hip hop, but it's not just in hip hop, because what I think hip hop is, really a caricature of culture. So yes. Art, as an artist, you know this, and as a person who studied art at the level that you have, we know that art can exist just for the sake of art, but we know that art also reflects culture. And so a lot of the things that we see in hip hop are reflective of what is going on in culture. Right. And we see two hip hop artists playing out something in culture that we see happening in hip hop, and we see the degradation and we see the disrespect for Black women. Right. Black women are the lowest on the totem pole in America. But what's tough is that they're now the most educated. Yes. So the lowest on the totem pole is the most educated population, and we got to. Bingo.
They are the absolute most necessary for transition. The church does not transition, it does not exist without, at least the Black church, it does not exist without the Black woman. We don't exist without the Black woman. And it's amazing how society has pulled them somewhere where they should think more of themselves. You know, and we got to do what we got to do, but they got to think more of themselves. But go ahead.
Let me do this, Bishop. I love doing this. Let's play this game where let me just remove 4 names from culture and tell me, I'm gonna remove 4 names from history and you tell me where we are.
Okay.
I'm gonna remove the Black woman Rosa Parks.
Okay.
I'm gonna remove Harriet Tubman.
Mm.
I'm gonna remove Madam C.J. Walker.
Mm.
And I'm gonna remove Shirley Chisholm. No Michelle, no, we're not even getting that far. So we removed Madam C.J. Walker, Shirley Chisholm, Rosa Parks, and Harriet Tubman.
Right.
Which means abolition work is gone.
Right.
We don't see the civil rights movement happening the same way because Rosa was the right pick. There was a lot of different people that could have been picked by the SCLC.
But she was the right pick.
But Rosa was the pick.
Yeah.
Let's remove Madam C.J. Walker and let's look at the fact that now our sisters are thriving on internet businesses in ways that they never have before. Yeah. Our sisters are thriving in business and in commerce in a way they never have before. If we take away the first Black woman to ever do that from the equation, if we extrapolate the first Black woman, Shirley Chisholm, to do what she did politically, who really paved the way for Kamala, quiet as it's kept. If we go back and we look at it and we extrapolate Black women from culture, we find ourselves in a really bad place and position. So I think we have not valued what is so necessary for us. And whenever you don't understand the purpose or the intention of something, you'll always abuse it.
Yes.
Whenever you don't understand why something was created or what the intended purpose of. And I think culturally, we're looking at the fact that we have to be people who protect women. I even think as pastors, it is imperative for us to be cognizant of how women perceive what we're saying.
That is true.
I think that, like, to not to get too deep, but I think when we talk about when we talk about women miscarrying and in childbirth, and then we come in church talking about we're pregnant for a promise, well, that just kind of makes you a jerk. And so I think that there's a lot of things that when we look at the African American woman, we have to say we have to do better, and as men, we have to hold each other accountable to doing better.
That's right. Certainly. Yeah. I mean, I just, that was just because we were unpacking a whole lot tonight, and this is just giving me an opportunity because I knew Chad could go wherever I wanted to go with this thing of being woke. And so what I want to do, Chad, because you ain't gonna believe this, man. We all we really
awesome.
there. We
That's
really
great.
And so I want you to speak to what we can do to this whole notion of police reform. I want you to unpack, if you will, voting and the evangelical church. Now that we are awake, from your vantage point, let's talk about what we can do. Let's leave them with a positive in your mindset, with your experiences. And let me say this on the onset, for those of you who are going to see it, we were not talking about every evangelical church. It's not every church. We were just talking in generality. So I think we established that. So, and what you said in the onset of this, we're talking. It's not every way every African American or Black person views it. But I want you to give us some words of encouragement, the last words on this whole thing of woke. But now what do we do with this whole notion of Jacob Blake and Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, police reform? What do we do with this thing, voting, because it's coming up? And how do we handle this notion of our brothers and sisters and with the evangelical church? And let's deal with that.
Okay, I think the first thing we have to do is we have to do our personal work. And so I think we have to do our personal work. One of my, as an individual who led kind of some protests and several different things, I wouldn't call myself an organizer, but what I would say this, one of the most frustrating things is uneducated protesters.
Yeah.
Or party protesters. So I think the first thing we have to do is we have to do our personal work. I think we have to kind of go back and look at our ancestors. We have to go back and we have to read a Martin King. We have to read a Fannie Lou Hamer. I think we have to read a Malcolm X. I think we have to read a Marcus Garvey. I think we have to read a Huey P. Newton. I think we have to read different things that can help us synthesize where we are now. I also think what is incredibly important is we have to look at our history. We have to look at the history of where we are and where we were. And so I think this will kind of tie in. And Bishop, you heard, we talked about this earlier, but there's an idea in Winston-Salem, because I want to tailor this to specifically where we are. Specifically, if we look at the history of where we are, I think looking at the history of where you live, even if you're not in Winston-Salem, it can give you a great picture of what is needed to be pushed forward. Because having a conversation with the elders or having a conversation with somebody from a different generation will let you know that you're not seeing anything that no one else has seen before, right? The Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. So I believe that 2020 could look a lot like 1964, or 2020 could look a lot like whatever. The point of it is that when we go back and we look at our history, I think we have to say, one, we have to hold our elected officials accountable. No matter whether you're black, white, brown, yellow, purple, we have to be people who in our education, who in the knowledge that we're receiving, the first thing we have to do is we have to hold our elected officials accountable. I think after we do the work of holding them accountable, we then have to involve ourselves in the work. And so I believe that as we involve ourselves in the work, I believe there's a lot of different places and spaces where that can be done. I think involving yourself in the work in a place where you're not interested doesn't help anybody. Involving yourself in the work where someone might not have any strength doesn't help anybody. But I think voter registration, I think making sure that others get to the polls, making sure that we are continually having conversations and that we're not just canceling people, making sure that even in our community, we're not fighting about things that we should not be fighting about, as opposed to really pushing forward work. I think that those are some things that we can really, really, really do. I encourage everybody, know who your county commissioners are, know who your city council members are, because 9 times out of 10, the majority of legislation that impacts and affects our lives is not happening at a national level.
Right.
It's happening at a local level.
Right.
Now, COVID, we can't do anything with that. That was a national thing, and we can't account for that. But when we look at money, when we look at restructuring, I think that that's huge for us. For me, I am not on and this is only my point of view, no one I work for. I am not a person that says we need to redirect funds. I believe in defunding. And I'm saying that mildly, because more so than defunding, I also believe in abolition, which is a whole nother thing and another conversation. But when we say defunding, really what I think we're saying is we're saying, let's take money away from law enforcement officers, not in pay, not in pension, but we're saying, let's take money away from them so that we can empower other people to do things that police officers are not trained to do. Right now in North Carolina, it takes you more time to get your barber's license than it does to get you through police school to get a gun and a badge. So it takes you more time to learn how to cut somebody's hair, color, dye, do all that with somebody's hair than it does for somebody to give you a gun and a badge. Also, what's tough is that police officers don't have to have 4-year degrees. So we're talking about people could be entering space without having certain levels of maturity, having certain levels of mental health and wellness. And so I think we got to look at the fact that the system that has worked is broken. And we're now realizing that, and we're seeing the cracks in it. And so I think it's our job to be involved wherever we can to speak truth to power.
Well said, sir. I think that's really good tonight. I hope y'all have enjoyed this. Uh, we were just throwing it around, and I gave Chad just an opportunity to kind of just speak. And um, he's a wealth of knowledge. And he's a powerful young man, as you can tell, as you can hear, very articulate, very educated, very smart, well read. He's just a nice dude. Um, and he can preach on top of all of that. I mean, he's a nice dude. So give them your information where people can actually contact you, because I know you're a busy man, but give them your information, your social media contacts, so that people, if they want to get in contact with you. And I'm also telling people, if Chad is a young man, if you want to support him, I'm gonna ask him to give his cash app too, as well. Just because we need to support one another as best that we can in all kinds of areas. And Chad being, I don't even know how old Chad is. How old are you, Chad?
I'll be 31 in like a couple of weeks.
He'll be 31, y'all, in a couple of weeks. Y'all hear how well read and well versed he is at 31. Listen, this is something that this is our leadership, that's going to take care of whatever's happening, when we get older. I ain't that old yet, but when we get older,
not old yet. You're not old yet.
You'll be younger. And so give out your information so people know how to get in contact with you.
Basically on every platform, and I can be terrible with social media sometimes, but it's the story of Chad. So I'm the millennial that's bad with technology sometimes, but it's the story of Chad on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So it's just the story of Chad.
And what's your cash app, just in case people want to support? Do you have a cash app?
I don't have a cash app.
Okay.
I'm the millennial.
If y'all see him in the street, look at his face. Y'all see him in the street. You do like the old church, the old mothers. They just shake some money in your hand. Be like, boy, go on. Go on. Be good in Jesus' name. You open it up, glory, and it be $10. What you want me to do with this?
Thank you, Mother Johnson.
Still give me $5. No. And so I appreciate you tonight, Chad. I thank you so much. Listen, y'all, this is out of my wheelhouse. Those of you who know me, I'm just a good guy. They tell me I like to change atmosphere. I'm a church boy, and that's what I am. But these things are really, really important for us. And I appreciate you all spending time with me tonight. Me and Chad Armstrong, Charles Armstrong the third. We call him Chad, and the story of Chad. And so everywhere that you can find him. Thank you all again for hanging out with me. Next week, we're going to be talking about all the tricks that they are trying to play on the voting and the voter registration. Y'all got to tune into this, because you're not going to believe what they're trying to do with this thing called voting. It is amazing. And how our ancestors really did fight for us to have that kind of right, and how this is a season where we should be doing it. But it's some sneaky stuff going on, y'all, and we've got to get into it. And then we have some very special guests who's going to come and talk about that. I got to get out of here, and we're going to just pick back up, I think, where we were, and we'll pick back up with this whole little song, and we'll get to the end of it in Jesus' wonderful name, I think. Amen. And we'll roll with that. But if not, listen, thank you, Chad, so much for hanging out with me tonight, for being my guest on Behind the Veil, and for doing what you did. Sir, this was worth it. This was worth a great conversation.
Thank you for the opportunity, Bishop. I'm always grateful to just kind of get wisdom from you.
Listen, we leaving up out of here. We're going to tell it all. God's been good to you. God's been good to Chad. God's been good to me. God is good to you. And so just keep on doing great things in his name. We love you and we appreciate you. This was a great, great conversation. Stay woke. Let's do some of this stuff. Let's get some training, personal work. Let's get involved and let's make a difference where we are in everything that we do. Until our next appointed time, this is Stephen Williams, the good bishop. We signing off.